same journey to find the way home. And I think we need each other. Why don't you take my hand and let's walk together? Take my hand and try. It's a long road, we can walk it together. Take my hand and try.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Life Now. I'm your host, Marty Carroll. Glad to be with you once again. Thank you for joining us, and I have a special guest with me today, old friend, and the whole reason that I even got started in doing some TV stuff, Miss Teresa Gross.
All
Teresa,
right.
thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Thank you. It really is a great opportunity. I appreciate it. And to be back on TV, let's hope I can get back in the swing of things.
I know, right?
And remember what I'm supposed to do.
Oh, look, y'all, she did a wonderful show, Designed for Destiny, that just touched a lot of lives, and Teresa's just a wonderful friend and woman of God, and just moves into prophetic as well, and just has wonderful words of wisdom to speak over lives, and you've been doing it for years, and we appreciate it. And
Well, thank you. I appreciate
just
that.
super
Awesome.
glad that you are here.
Well, you know, it's interesting that you would call me today since I had just barely woke up. And you said, hey, will you pray about it? And I'm thinking, yeah, right. He knows I'm not going to pray about it. It's like, this is what I
Right.
do. This is the gift that God's given me to be able to encourage people and let them share about their lives. And that's what we're going to do tonight.
Let's do it.
You're going to share this incredible story that your life has been, and it has inspired people, it has encouraged people, but it's your unique story. And God has put these, I call them graces, in your life, and these giftings that when you were a little boy, you had no idea.
No clue what I was getting into or what he was doing. You know, some of my favorite lines from both Shakespeare and the great Canadian rock poets, Rush. All the world's a stage, and we are merely players, actors, and portrayers. We're each another's audience, you know, inside the gilded cage. We're stories. Our lives interact. Sometimes we're watching a life, and sometimes we're involved in a life. And we all have these amazing stories that God is writing through us. And they're meant to be shared. They're meant to be shared with one another for encouragement. And yeah, this is kind of what I wanted to do tonight. I mean, I've been through some things, and the Lord has led me through a real interesting life, I guess, to say the least, and just seen some wonderful miracles. I just pray that it is a source of hope and encouragement for folks.
Well, and anytime I believe you share what Jesus is to you in your life, and the story that he's put inside of you, working the ins and outs, the wilderness times, the great times, the mountain times, the mystery times when you're like, where am I supposed to go? And you're trying to hear by faith, and you know that God has the way, but you're not sure what his way is. And quite often in my life, it's like, I want my way and he wants his way.
Right.
But God works through that because he wants your story to be an example, a powerful
That's right.
entity of who he is. And, you know, we're here so that we can be image bearers of Jesus Christ. And so in your story, as many know, you're blind, and here you are. You have your own TV show, been on the radio off and on. You have this wonderful voice that's made for the radio and TV. I mean, God knew what he was doing. And
It's definitely a face for radio. But
yeah, you had to throw that out there.
That's right. The voice, I can go with radio. The TV's been that's been a fun one. But anyway, well, thank you.
And I believe that God knew at the right time TV would come. And so let's back up. And you were born, and you find out, and your parents find out that you have some, you know, some issues, some handicaps, and you're blind. And so what made you want to become this person you are today? What pushed you? What drove you?
Wow, that's a loaded question. To go, you know, all the way back, the basis, I was born in 68, and 1968, not 1868, 1968. And it was, you know, what a year. So many things going on in our country, so many beginnings and endings. I love to look at, and this is a complete side note, but love to look at history when people come into the world, what's going on around them.
Right.
And I did some research on that a few weeks ago, just looking at 1968. What was that all about? You know, and there were the deaths of Bobby Kennedy and the deaths of Martin Luther King. You know, different music was ending, music beginnings and ending. There was just, I don't know. It's just interesting to see what's going on around. So this was a beginning. The summer of '68 was my beginning in the midst of in a world that was chaotic. The Vietnam War was going on.
Right.
And I don't know why I'm saying all that. It's just, I just find it fascinating. I think there's a connection. But was born with retinoblastoma, which is a form of cancer. And at that time, very rare, and not a lot of hope. Most children at that point died because it was so hard to catch. It was so hard to pinpoint, you know, when you were born. And so we rocked on for a few months, and my parents noticed, you know, not a lot of response on the left side. And the pediatrician kept saying, this is just developmental. It's developmental. Hang in there. It's going to come together. And finally, at about 4 or 5 months, they sent me to an ophthalmologist, and he took one look at it and immediately recognized it as cancer and a tumor that had completely consumed the left eye and had begun to move over into the right eye. So, 3 months in New Orleans, one of my favorite cities on the planet. I call it the city that heard my cries.
Yeah.
You know, there's so much talk about the darkness and things that go on in New Orleans, but I see New Orleans as a city of light because it's where God saved me.
Right.
It's where God literally saved my life. And so I spent 3 months down there, you know, receiving chemo and radiation. They removed the left eye and did a lot of treatment on the right eye. And that kind of set the stage, you know, for the great adventure,
Yes.
if you will. And so not knowing, didn't know I couldn't see, basically, you know, at such a young age. Didn't realize the deficits I had, I would develop just kind of normally, not recognizing I had a deficit and having to make adjustments. My development was just kind of that natural progression because it just was what it was from the beginning.
Right.
So it wasn't until I got into school, that school age, that you know, things began to get a little challenging. But even then, I don't know that I necessarily recognized it as a challenge. Does that make sense? I just had to figure out, you know, how it was I was going to do the things that all the other kids were doing.
Right. And you never felt like you couldn't do what the kids could do.
No, never, ever. I was always looking for some way of, you know, being a part of whatever was going on. I didn't think that it was a deficit that required me to not be able to do something. Well, why can't I? You know, why can't I do this? There's no, in my mind, there was no reason why
Right.
I couldn't do it. And, you know, I was surrounded. I had a wonderful family, a family of faith, and parents that allowed me to experiment and do things and fall down. I wasn't placed in a bubble, thank God. And I attribute that a lot to this mentality of conquering whatever there is in front of me.
Right.
I wasn't placed in a shelter. I wasn't placed somewhere where I couldn't fall and scrape my knee or bump my head or anything, you know, despite the visual deficit. I was, you know, said, hey, let's figure it out. Let's go. So I always had the opportunity to learn and fall down.
Well, aren't you glad your parents were able to see the wisdom behind that?
Indeed. Indeed. You know, the first time I remember the first time I remember knowing that there was something I wasn't going to be able to participate in was 3rd grade. And I remember coming home from school. We'd gotten letters from, you know, the Dixie Youth baseball program, you know, that was so big in the area.
Right.
I grew up in Oak Grove, so that was home. You know, saying, okay, time for summer tryouts, and I'm thinking, well, I'm fixing to play baseball. And yes, I'll never forget getting in the truck and say, Dad, we got the letter, you know, for baseball. And, you know, he took the letter, he looked at me and said, well, son, I don't know if you're going to be able to do this. You know, not just because you might hurt yourself, you may hurt somebody. So that was my beginning of accepting the limitation, but finding a way to participate. And I share the sports part because sports has been a very big part of my life, and you know, how in the world is that even possible? But that's where I began to learn the principles of encouragement and unity, team, those ideas, and understanding that that's what it requires in life. That those are just so essential to our success as people, you know, in life, is understanding what it means to encourage one another and to be unified, have one mind. So couldn't play, so I assumed the role of manager and just being around my brother's team and being around all the athletics that I could possibly be around and being there just to encourage the other ball players and learn the game and learn an appreciation and love for the game.
That's awesome.
So
Because what you did is you deferred your power and your energy towards a positive thing, and really, I would say it's one of your giftings anyway, is that of encouragement. And so it was probably very natural to just gravitate towards that.
it felt that way. It honestly felt that way. And even into high school, despite the challenges with, you know, I had to learn how to, they had to figure out some way for me to intake the information. And at that time, all they had was these large print books. And when I tell you large print books, we're talking the size of this, of this desk in width. And, you know, and it took 2 desks in a classroom to hold the book up because it was so big, but it's all they had. And I was blessed with a lot of teachers who really took the time to, you know, to come to my desk, teach what was put on the board. And we had these books, and they're blowing up large copies of worksheets, and
Right.
you know, so we, you know, growing up in Oak Grove was very, very beneficial, though it was something they'd never really dealt with before, so it was a first for them. So, you know, hats off to all my teachers, and I
Right.
can name every one of them
Oh,
to this
wow.
day that was a part of my education that made those concessions to make sure I got an education.
Right.
And so in the midst of all of that, processing that, being a part of athletics all the way through high school and even into college, that was the beginnings. And I had no idea at the time. I honestly had no idea at the time. I knew I was called into some type of ministry, but didn't know what it was, in spite of the fact that I knew what I did for the teams. I knew how God was using me in my friends' lives, and, you know, I was one they always had to come talk to.
Yeah.
You would have thought that would have given me a kind of a clue, but not necessarily. I don't guess. I missed it for a long time. But it began to make sense.
But you
Eventually.
knew at that time that ministry was something that you felt was in your heart.
Yeah.
So
definitely.
when you were in high school, did you know you were going to go to college?
I knew I was called into ministry, but I reached that little rebellious part, you know, where you want to do what you want to do, and I got involved.
Oh, I wouldn't know anything about
You
that.
don't know anything about that, do you? Me? My will? What? But I started working for the local radio station and worked there as a DJ for a couple of years, and decided, this was when I was in high school, and decided, you know, that's what I want to do. I love music. Music's always been a huge part of my life. It's been a source of encouragement. And with my visual deficits, my hearing has been what I've predominantly leaned on. And so, you know, listened to a lot of music for encouragement and so forth. And so I thought, this is it. So instead of going directly into ministry, I go to college to study radio and spend about 2 years banging my head against that brick wall. And, you know, kind of got involved in the night scene, you know, with all that, and just couldn't find answers. And I began to find myself more frustrated, and for the first time in my life, I was asking God why. That, you know, people go, did you ever ask God why did you have to deal with this? That was the first time, because I got to college, and the professors at college were not quite as, what's the word?
Ready to help you
Eager
as much.
to, right, to be eager to.
You're supposed to do it.
Right. You do it. And so that was a rough time.
Oh, yeah.
That was a very, very dark time. And I almost feel some of that, you know, even thinking about it. But there was a youth convention from my church that was going on a state youth convention. And at the darkest point, the darkest place of my asking, why, God, why have I had to deal with this? Why can't I do this? Why? My church calls me and asks, hey, we need an extra male counselor for this youth convention, and would you mind coming and serving? And I'm like, absolutely, but I'd love to, love to. And so I went, and I don't remember the date, I don't remember the speaker, I don't remember the worship band, I don't even remember the city we were in the state. I have no clue. My only memory of that youth convention was me balled up in the fetal position, crying my eyes out with my pastor, leaned over me, praying over me, going, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And that was my surrendering point. That was the surrendering point of going, okay, God, I'm not sure what exactly it is that you got from me, but I'm fixing to chase after you and find out. So that's where I entered into Bible college at that point, went to Oklahoma, moved to Oklahoma, and was in Bible college for 4 years up there.
Wow. So when you say surrender, you were just willing to say, I don't have to know the why?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the surrender was enough of me. Even though I don't know, it's kind of like when God told Abraham to go. And, Abraham like, well, which way? He just said, go. That's what it felt like. Go. Just go.
So when you went to Oklahoma, you were going into counseling, or you just...
I had no idea. I just started taking classes. Started a Bachelor of Science degree. Ended up being in family life and Christian education and Bible. The coach, the athletic director for the college, was a friend of the family, and he came down and talked to me about coming to school up there. So I went, and he hired me to work in the athletic department as a sports information director. So once again, I continued in this athletic vein,
right,
along with my studies, and that was my training ground. And I did summer camps. I toured and did, worked youth camps for a summer, and learned real quick, no, youth ministry's not it. That's definitely not it. Love teenagers, love them, but knew that was not my calling. I didn't feel a sense of pastoral type stuff the whole time. The ministry of encouragement and listening, and people coming to me sharing, the difficult things was before me the whole time. It never crossed my mind, ever. In those 4 years, stayed on as residence director over the dorms. Still, no clue. Went on the road with a Christian band, praying with people night after night in the altars. Traveling, all over the country, doing this, and still no clue. So
when did you get the clue?
Well, the clue came. The clue came in late 1994, early 95. I'm in my prayer time, and God says directly, Marty, I want you to leave Oklahoma. I want you to go home, go to Northeast Louisiana University, get your master's in marriage and family therapy, and start counseling.
Wow.
Light bulb.
Wow.
Light bulb. And looking back, I can see where it was all training ground, but yet blinded. Sighted, but blinded to what he was doing. It made sense in retrospect. It made sense in hindsight. But in the moment?
No. But in your path, I can just see where, like you said, the light bulb took a while to get the ding. Mm-hmm. But even in that, God was still setting you up for the preparation and the pattern of the model that he had in his mind for you. Yeah. And if you'd have rushed that, right, the model still wouldn't have been ready at the ding part, exactly. And you wouldn't even probably got the revelation at that time, because, he saves revelation for the time where we are at that point where we're intimate enough to have handled the revelation. Right. Because if we're not quite ready, right, it might be like a 16-year-old go drive the car, and they're not quite ready to go drive the car.
Exactly. A baby with a power tool.
Oh, I felt like that sometimes, baby with the power tool. I love the sound of it, but I don't know what to do with it.
I don't know what to do with it. I'm going to hurt somebody or myself.
I've thought about it too.
Yeah. Exactly.
But
That's
at
what
that
it
moment
was.
when that light dinged, you knew
Mhm.
that the culmination of all the whys, of
Yeah.
of the doubt, the fear, the anger, I mean
Right.
all the feelings that came with this life that God had given you.
Right.
But at that moment when you heard his voice, you're like, yes,
Mhm.
yes, this is it.
Mhm. Oh, I get it. This makes sense. You
And
know.
if people are listening and watching the show, I would just want them to know that you don't necessarily have to get that that particular kind of voice from God, but He's
Right.
always speaking
Right.
all the time. Dreams, visions, through a pastor, through a book.
Mhm.
He wants you to know Him. He
Mhm.
wants to be known by you.
Yeah.
And you, in your life, it's so wonderful because He knew what you would be able to handle.
Right.
He knew that, okay, I can trust Marty with this because I know his heart. His heart's towards me.
Yeah. Even in the struggle. I mean, in 2 Corinthians, where Paul talks about the thorn that he prayed to be removed 3 times, and God says, "No, my grace is sufficient." I can't tell you how many times I've had to fall back on that because I would get ahead. I would think I'm moving and doing what I need to be doing, and there'd be some type of failure. And I'm like, okay, I've missed it. I missed it. And I'm like, why? And God says, "My grace is sufficient. In your weakness, I will be made strong." And when I'm able to step back and rest in that, that's when there's this strength that emerges. There's when this reckless abandon emerges.
And that connection, that syncing up with
Hmm.
where God's going, that's really where I have found in my life, and I'm sure in your life, that you get to that place where that's what it's about.
Right.
I want that connection to where I'm syncing with Him.
Hmm.
We're synchronized like synchronized swimmers,
Hmm.
and you do the flips at the right time, you do the tumbles at the right time, you
Hmm.
go under when you need to,
Hmm.
and you're clinging to Him.
I
Uh,
like to say just moving to the rhythms of grace. When you're moving to the rhythms of His grace, you just feel, in sync and complete. But sometimes it takes some pushing through to get there. It
well,
does.
and I think the pushing through is all a part of it too. It's the journey where, in those pushing times, is when God really makes Himself so intimate with us because He's all we have.
Hmm.
And
Absolutely.
and I think in our stories, that's what makes it so powerful is that we come to the place where you're like, ah, why didn't I get it sooner?
Right.
And God's saying, it's okay.
Right.
I love you. You're my child. We're going to walk this out together,
Hmm.
and things are going to get better,
Hmm.
you know?
Yep.
So,
And we know there's a lot of folks out there that are kind of in that search. You feel that you know that there are people out there that are searching. What am I supposed to be doing? Where where am I supposed to be right now? In this life, and sometimes it can be a struggle to see it or feel it. Like we talked about before we went on, we're talking about feeling a connection, feeling, and it's there. It is there, and sometimes it just takes some pushing in, a lot of faith, simple faith, deep love for the Father, and you will get those answers without
and He
doubt.
really He wants you to know those things.
Hmm.
It's not like He's just trying to hide, but yet He wants the mystery of, I want them to search it out and
Right.
search for me and want to pursue me. And so He'll step back sometimes, and you've got to find Him.
Right. Right. And it takes courage, folks. It takes a lot of courage to do it. And I get reminded of that. People may talk about, they may see courage in some of the things I've done, through life. And if so, it's just because of what God has placed there. I know I had to exercise it, but He placed it there to be used. And sometimes you have to ignore what's around you, ignore what you see, ignore what you hear, ignore those feelings, and push through to what you know. Because sometimes our senses lie to us. What we see, hear, smell, taste, it's an illusion, or it's distraction to what's actually taking place in the spiritual. And we have to follow what we know in our spirit, what we know in our hearts, versus those things that we think what's being communicated to us around us is telling us. Does that make
Right.
sense?
And I think that sometimes, because we are emotional beings, our feelings really start to dictate where we take ourselves.
It really
And
does.
so God's really not, that's not what he wants us to do. He wants us to be led by his Spirit.
Right.
And, to be led by the Spirit, like in your life, there's so many times I know you would have wanted to go in your direction. But being led by the Spirit took you away from things that would have caused it to take longer to get where you needed to go.
Right.
And we die to ourselves so that we can live. And, your ministry is so powerful, Marty, because you have overcome great hindrances to what people would have thought it took to do what you're doing.
Right.
I mean, you never decided, oh, well, I can't do that.
Right.
Oh, well, I can't do that. And thank God your parents and friends, and you were in Oak Grove in a smaller place, so you could get that extra attention, and never had a definition that said, I can't do that.
Right. Right. Yeah, fear was not something I knew a lot about. I lived with a lot of reckless abandon, honestly. I just did it. I'm like, they said, well, no. I'm like, why? There's, in my mind, there was no reason not to be able to do this or to do that. So I don't like living with that fear. It can hinder. And, I've come to understand a little bit deeper in recent years more of the miracle of what God has done in my life because of so many children that died with this. And every ophthalmologist I've ever been to talked about, well, you're just a walking miracle because you're in that real low percentile that survived this in the late 60s. So, I knew there was a purpose. I knew there was a plan. I know that God has had some things orchestrated and, just trying to follow him and hang on to that.
Well, and I think you're not just hanging on. I think you're thriving.
Sometimes it feels like you're just hanging on.
You're trying to follow the heart of God.
Right.
The heart of God.
Right.
And in that relationship, when we're following the heart of God and with the best of our abilities to go with the Spirit, then the Spirit leads us.
Right.
And we get closer to Abba, and we begin to see, it's right where I want to be anyway. Right where I want to be.
Right. So what have we got, about a minute?
We got about 30 seconds.
No, about 30 seconds. All right. I want to thank you guys for joining us. Thank you, Teresa, for being with me tonight.
Thank you so much for letting me come.
Absolutely.
I didn't
really
plug up
appreciate
too
it.
bad.
No, not at all. And we are believing for you guys. We are hoping for you guys and praying for you that you find everything that God has for you and that you overcome and conquer because it is doable. It is doable.
Yes,
Through
it
him,
is.
all things are possible.
Amen.
Everything you could possibly need was purchased at Calvary through his death, and all your significance is found in him. We love you.
All right.
Why don't you